Imagine a life where the mind is as deep and still as the ocean, unmoved by the waves that crash upon its surface. This is the way of the wise, unaffected by praise, unshaken by blame, untouched by the endless noise of the world. In a time where distractions are constant, where validation is sought from every direction, where people exhaust themselves trying to be everything to everyone, the greatest wisdom lies in knowing where to place one's energy. There is a peace that exists beyond the demands of the world, a tranquility that is not disturbed by external forces. The Buddha teaches that this peace is not found outside. It is cultivated from within. It is not granted by the approval of others, nor is it taken away by their judgment. It is built through wisdom, through restraint, through the understanding of what truly matters. But few people see this truth. Most are caught in the endless cycle of oversharing, of absorbing the emotions of others, of holding on to resentment, of chasing recognition that never truly satisfies. They give too much of themselves to people who drain them, to situations that deplete them, to tasks that bring them no joy. And then they wonder why they feel empty, exhausted, lost. But the answer is simple. Energy, once given away carelessly, is not easily regained. To live with peace is to live with awareness, to recognize what nourishes the soul and what depletes it. The wise do not allow their energy to be scattered. They protect their mind as one protects a sacred space. They choose carefully who they allow into their life, what they give their attention to, what thoughts they entertain. They do not give endlessly to those who only take. They do not engage in battles that are not theirs to fight. They do not carry burdens that are not meant for them. This is not selfishness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that one cannot pour from an empty cup, that true generosity comes not from exhaustion, but from a place of fullness. But to live in this way, one must first understand what drains their energy. The Buddha teaches that the first step to peace is awareness, to observe, to reflect, to recognize the patterns that lead to suffering. Who are the people that leave you feeling lighter, and who are the ones that weigh you down? What situations bring clarity, and which ones create turmoil? What actions align with your nature, and which ones pull you away from yourself? These are the questions that must be asked, not once, but constantly, as life shifts and changes. A person who ignores these questions will find themselves trapped in cycles of exhaustion. They will give too much to those who do not reciprocate. They will stay in places that no longer serve them. They will continue habits that drain their spirit. But a person who understands their own nature will begin to make different choices. They will set boundaries. They will walk away from what no longer nourishes them. They will honor their energy, knowing that by doing so, they create space for what truly matters. And yet, even as people learn to protect their energy, they struggle with another great challenge, the fear of saying no. The Buddha once said, "The root of suffering is attachment," and one of the greatest attachments people hold is the need to please others. They fear disappointing those around them, fear being seen as selfish, fear that if they set boundaries, they will lose love, respect, connection. And so, they say yes when they want to say no. They take on responsibilities that are not theirs. They overcommit, overextend, overburden themselves, believing that to refuse is to fail. But the truth is, saying no is not a rejection of others. It is an affirmation of the self. A person who cannot say no will always be at the mercy of those who ask. They will live according to the demands of others rather than their own purpose. They will sacrifice their well-being for obligations that do not nourish them. And in the end, they will have nothing left to give, not to themselves, not to anyone. The Buddha teaches the middle path, a life of balance, of neither indulgence nor deprivation, of neither excessive giving nor selfish withholding. To walk this path, one must learn the art of saying no with kindness, with confidence, with the understanding that their well-being is just as sacred as anyone else's. A wise person does not say yes to everything. They do not allow guilt to dictate their choices. They do not overcommit, knowing that to be truly present in what matters, they must be selective with their time, their energy, their efforts. They choose with care, knowing that every yes comes with a cost. They do not give out of obligation, but out of true generosity. And because of this, when they do give, they give fully, without resentment, without exhaustion, without regret. And yet, even as one learns to say no, they must also learn another lesson, the lesson of detachment. The Buddha teaches that we are not troubled by what happens, but by our reaction to it. People exhaust themselves not only by what they do, but by what they take in. They absorb the emotions of others. They carry the burdens of those around them. They allow negativity to seep into their mind. They confuse compassion with self-sacrifice, believing that to help others, they must suffer alongside them. But this is not wisdom. It is misunderstanding. True compassion is not in losing oneself in another's pain. It is in offering kindness while remaining whole. A person who takes on the struggles of others as their own will find themselves drowning in suffering that was never theirs to begin with. They will mistake empathy for obligation, mistaking the pain of others for something they must carry. But just as a lotus rises above the water without being touched by the mud, so too must one learn to be present without being consumed. To care deeply, yet remain grounded. To listen, yet not absorb. To support, yet not lose themselves in the weight of another's sorrow. A wise person does not turn away from suffering, but they do not become lost in it either. They understand that they can offer a helping hand without allowing themselves to be pulled under. They give love without losing their own peace. They remain steady, like the tree that offers shade, but does not fall when others lean upon it. They do not allow the emotions of others to dictate their own. This is not coldness, it is strength. It is the ability to give without depletion, to care without suffering, to walk through the world with an open heart, yet remain unshaken. And so, the path becomes clear. Not one of endless giving, but of wise generosity. Not one of seeking approval, but of inner validation. Not one of absorbing the chaos of the world, but of standing firm within it. The Buddha's teachings are not about escaping life, but about learning how to move through it with grace, with wisdom, with an unshakable peace that is not disturbed by external forces. A person who walks this path does not exhaust themselves seeking fulfillment from others. They do not scatter their energy in places where it is wasted. They do not allow guilt to dictate their choices. They give where it matters. They protect what is sacred. They carry only what is theirs to carry. And in doing so, they find something greater than fleeting approval, greater than temporary comfort. They find freedom, not in running away from the world, not in controlling it, but in walking through it, steady, unshaken, at peace. A river does not question the path it takes. It moves forward, adapting to the landscape, carving through stone, weaving around obstacles, always flowing toward its destination. It does not resist the bends, nor does it cling to any single moment of its journey. And yet, human beings struggle with this simple truth. They hold on to things that no longer serve them, resisting the natural course of life, believing that if they grip tightly enough, they can prevent change. But change is not something to be avoided. It is the essence of existence itself. The Buddha once said, "Everything that has a beginning has an ending. Make your peace with that, and all will be well." And yet, people struggle to accept this. They cling to relationships that have run their course, fearing that letting go means losing something precious. They resist the endings that life presents, refusing to acknowledge that every chapter must close before a new one can begin. They grieve not only for what is lost, but for what they wish could have been. But in doing so, they imprison themselves in a past that no longer exists. They rob themselves of the present moment, drowning in memories instead of embracing the life unfolding before them. A wise person understands that everything is impermanent. Love, success, pain, even the self we believe ourselves to be, none of it is fixed, none of it is eternal. And when this is truly understood, suffering lessens. The fear of loss disappears, the need to control fades. Instead of clinging, there is trust. Instead of resisting, there is surrender. To move through life with peace is to move with the flow of existence, to let things come and go as they must, to accept that nothing was ever ours to hold on to in the first place. Yet, even as people begin to accept impermanence, they struggle with another great challenge, the illusion of control. The mind seeks certainty. It desires to shape the future, to plan every step, to ensure that things unfold exactly as imagined. And when life does not follow these expectations, suffering arises. Disappointment, frustration, anxiety, all of these come from the false belief that control is possible. But the Buddha's wisdom reminds us, you cannot control the results, only your actions. A person who believes they can control life will always be at war with it. They will resist the unexpected, fight against what they cannot change, exhaust themselves in a battle they can never win. But a person who understands that control is an illusion walks through life with ease. They do not waste energy trying to force things to be a certain way. They act with intention, but they do not cling to outcomes. They move with purpose, but they trust that life will unfold as it must. This does not mean passivity. It does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what must be done, then letting go. A farmer does not demand the rain to fall. He simply plants his seeds and trusts the seasons. A sailor does not command the wind. He adjusts his sails and moves with it. In the same way, the wise do not force life to conform to their wishes. They act with wisdom. They make choices. They put in effort. But they do not suffer when things do not go as planned. They trust that whatever comes is what is meant to be. But trust is difficult for those who live in fear. The Buddha once said, "The whole secret of existence is to have no fear." And yet, fear rules the lives of many. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. It whispers in the mind, creating doubts, keeping people stuck, preventing them from living fully. It convinces them that they must play it safe, that they must avoid risk, that they must control every possible outcome to avoid disappointment. But fear is a prison, and those who are ruled by it will never know freedom. To be free, one must walk through fear, not avoid it, not suppress it, but face it directly. Fear exists only in the mind, and like a shadow, it disappears when light is shined upon it. A person who is willing to see through fear, who is willing to move forward despite it, discovers something incredible, that most of what they feared was never real to begin with. That the mind creates worst-case scenarios that never come to pass. That the greatest risk is not in failing, but in never trying at all. And yet, even as people learn to move beyond fear, they must also learn another great lesson, the lesson of presence. The Buddha teaches, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. But the mind is rarely in the present. It clings to the past, replaying mistakes, reliving memories, holding on to pain. Or it jumps to the future, worrying about what might come, imagining endless possibilities, seeking something just beyond reach. And in doing so, it misses what is right in front of it, the only moment that is real. A person who lives in the past will always feel regret. A person who lives in the future will always feel anxious, but a person who lives fully in the present experiences peace. They do not carry the weight of what has already happened, nor do they burden themselves with what has yet to come. They breathe, they observe, they appreciate, they live. They understand that the past is unchangeable and the future is unknown, but the present is where life happens. Yet, living in the present is not as easy as it sounds. The mind is restless, constantly pulling away from now, constantly seeking something else. But with practice, with awareness, with effort, presence can be cultivated. The simple act of paying attention, truly paying attention to what is happening in this moment, is enough to transform life. To feel the breath entering the lungs, to notice the warmth of the sun on the skin, to listen, truly listen, when another speaks. These small acts of presence bring a depth to life that cannot be found anywhere else, and so the path becomes clear, not one of clinging but of flowing, not one of control but of trust, not one of fear but of courage. The Buddha's teachings do not promise a life without difficulty, but they offer a way to move through life without suffering. They teach not how to escape reality, but how to embrace it fully, with all its changes, all its uncertainties, all its imperfections. A person who walks this path no longer fears the unexpected. They do not resist what must change. They do not carry the weight of yesterday or the worries of tomorrow. They wake each day with lightness, moving through life with ease, with trust, with gratitude for what is, rather than longing for what was or what could be. And in this way, they find what so many have spent lifetimes searching for, not in another place, not in another time, but right here, in the stillness of this very moment. A tree does not struggle against the wind. It bends, sways, allows the storm to pass without resistance. A river does not refuse to change its course. It moves around obstacles, flowing wherever the path opens. Nature does not fight against itself, and yet human beings resist life at every turn. They resist what they cannot control. They fight against what they cannot change. They cling to what was and fear what is to come. And in this resistance, they create suffering. The Buddha once said, "Pain is certain, but suffering is optional." The difference between the two lies not in what happens, but in how it is received. People believe that peace comes when life aligns perfectly with their desires. They think happiness is found when circumstances are ideal, when everything unfolds exactly as planned. But life does not bend to human wishes. It moves according to its own rhythm, unpredictable, ever-changing. The wise understand this, and instead of trying to control life, they learn to move with it. They do not resist change, they embrace it. They do not fear uncertainty. They trust in the unfolding of existence. They understand that suffering does not come from what happens, but from the mind's refusal to accept it. Yet even as people learn to accept change, they struggle with another great burden, the burden of comparison. The Buddha teaches, do not dwell on the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. But in today's world, people rarely live in the present. They look at others, measuring their own worth against what they see. They compare success, wealth, beauty, happiness, as if life were a race, as if fulfillment were something that could be ranked and measured. But comparison is a thief. It steals joy, it creates doubt, it turns gratitude into longing. A person who lives in comparison will never be satisfied. No matter what they achieve, no matter what they possess, there will always be someone with more. And so they chase endlessly, believing that if they just had what another has, they would finally be happy. But happiness is not found in reaching what others have. It is found in appreciating what already exists. A wise person does not measure their life against anyone else's. They understand that each journey is unique, that fulfillment is not a competition, that the only standard worth following is the one set by their own heart. And yet, even as people learn to free themselves from comparison, they must also learn the greatest lesson of all, the lesson of letting go. The Buddha once told the story of a man who carried a heavy sack of stones everywhere he went. His back ached, his steps were slow, his body was exhausted. Yet when asked why he did not put the sack down, he said, "These stones are important. They remind me of where I have been. They define who I am." And so it is with most people. They carry burdens long after they should have been released. Regrets from the past, grudges against others, guilt for mistakes made. They hold on to these things as if they are part of their identity, as if letting go would mean losing themselves. But the truth is, nothing weighs a person down more than an unwillingness to release what no longer serves them. A person who holds on to pain will suffer long after the pain has passed. A person who clings to anger will remain imprisoned by it, even when the reason for anger is gone. Letting go is not about forgetting. It is about freedom. It is about choosing peace over resentment, acceptance over regret, presence over the past. It is the understanding that carrying pain does not heal it, that replaying memories does not change them, that life moves forward whether we move with it or not. A wise person does not dwell in what has already happened. They learn, they grow, they release, and they step forward into what is yet to come. Yet, even as people begin to let go, they face another challenge, the challenge of self-acceptance. The Buddha reminds us, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. And yet, people are often their own harshest critics. They judge themselves more severely than they judge others. They carry guilt for mistakes long past. They believe they are not enough, that they must achieve more, prove more, be more before they are worthy of happiness. But the truth is, nothing needs to be earned. Worth is not something that can be lost, nor is it something that must be proven. A person who does not accept themselves will always be searching, always reaching, always believing that fulfillment is just beyond their grasp. But a person who understands their own worth does not chase approval. They do not wait to love themselves until they have become better. They love themselves now as they are, not because they are perfect, but because they are alive. They do not seek validation from the world. They validate themselves. They do not measure their worth by success, by beauty, by comparison. They measure it by their ability to be at peace within. And so the path becomes clear, not a path of struggle, but of surrender. Not a path of holding on, but of release. Not a path of self-doubt, but of self-trust. The Buddha's teachings are not about escaping life, but about learning how to live fully, without resistance, without fear, without the unnecessary suffering that comes from fighting what simply is. A person who walks this path does not waste energy comparing their journey to another's. They do not cling to pain that should have been released. They do not wait to love themselves until some future moment when they feel they have become enough. They walk with lightness, knowing that nothing was ever missing, that peace was never something to be found, but something that had been within them all along. And in this way they become free, not because life is perfect, not because they have achieved everything, but because they have learned to live in the only place where peace can truly exist. Here, now, in the quiet presence of this very breath. A bird does not question the sky before it spreads its wings. It does not ask if it is worthy of flight, nor does it hesitate before taking off. It simply moves with the wind, trusting in its own nature. And yet human beings hesitate. They doubt their own worth, question their own choices, fear failure before they even begin. They wait for the perfect moment, for certainty, for guarantees that life will unfold exactly as they wish. But life does not offer such promises. The Buddha once said, "The trouble is, you think you have time, but time waits for no one." Every moment spent in hesitation, in self-doubt, in waiting for the right circumstances, is a moment lost forever. People live as if they have an infinite number of tomorrows, as if they will always have another chance to love, to speak their truth, to follow their hearts. They postpone joy, delaying happiness for some future moment when everything is perfect. But perfection is an illusion, a mirage that always seems just out of reach. And so, they wait. They wait to take risks. They wait to chase their dreams. They wait to say what needs to be said. And then, one day, they look back and realize they have spent more time waiting than living. The wise understand that the only time to live is now, not tomorrow, not when the circumstances are ideal, not when fear disappears, but now. They do not let uncertainty stop them, for they know that certainty is an illusion. They do not let fear paralyze them, for they know that fear is only a shadow created by the mind. They move forward, not because they are without doubt, but because they understand that doubt is a part of the journey. They take each step with faith, knowing that action creates clarity, that movement shapes destiny, that life rewards those who dare to live fully. Yet, even as people learn to embrace the present, they struggle with another great challenge, the fear of failure. The Buddha teaches there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. And yet, people fear mistakes more than they fear stagnation. They would rather stay in the safety of the known than risk falling. They would rather live in a cage of comfort than step into the uncertainty of growth. But failure is not the enemy, it is the teacher. Every mistake holds a lesson. Every misstep is a part of the path. To fear failure is to fear learning, to fear progress, to fear life itself. A person who understands this does not let failure define them. They do not give up after one setback, nor do they allow obstacles to convince them they are unworthy. They understand that the road to wisdom is paved with mistakes, that growth comes not from avoiding failure, but from rising after each fall. The river does not stop flowing because it encounters a rock, it simply moves around it. The tree does not cease to grow because the wind bends its branches. It strengthens itself against the storm. In the same way, a wise person does not retreat in the face of struggle. They adapt, they learn, they keep going. But even as people begin to accept failure, they face another burden, the burden of the opinions of others. The Buddha once said, "Let go of what people think and be free." Yet so many live their lives trapped by the expectations of others. They seek approval, fearing judgment, shaping themselves to fit the expectations of society, of family, of those around them. But the truth is, no matter what one does, there will always be those who disapprove. There will always be those who criticize, who misunderstand, who impose their own beliefs. And if a person lives to please others, they will never truly be free. A wise person does not shape themselves to fit the mold of others. They do not seek validation, for they understand that true worth does not come from external approval. It comes from within. They do not waste energy trying to be liked by everyone, for they know that such a pursuit is impossible. They walk their path with confidence, knowing that not everyone will understand, and that is okay. They live not to meet expectations, but to be true to themselves. Yet even as people free themselves from the opinions of others, they must also learn the greatest lesson of all, the lesson of impermanence. The Buddha reminds us, nothing is forever except change, and yet people resist this truth. They want love to last forever. They do not cling to pain that should have been released. They do not wait to love themselves until some future moment when they feel they have become enough. They walk with lightness, knowing that nothing was ever missing, that peace was never something to be found, but something that had been within them all along. And in this way they become free, not because life is perfect, not because they have achieved everything, but because they have learned to live in the only place where peace can truly exist. Here, now, in the quiet presence of this very breath. A bird does not question the sky before it spreads its wings. It does not ask if it is worthy of flight, nor does it hesitate before taking off. It simply moves with the wind, trusting in its own nature. And yet human beings hesitate. They doubt their own worth, question their own choices, fear failure before they even begin. They wait for the perfect moment, for certainty, for guarantees that life will unfold exactly as they wish. But life does not offer such promises. The Buddha once said, "The trouble is, you think you have time, but time waits for no one." Every moment spent in hesitation, in self-doubt, in waiting for the right circumstances, is a moment lost forever. People live as if they have an infinite number of tomorrows, as if they will always have another chance to love, to speak their truth, to follow their hearts. They postpone joy, delaying happiness for some future moment when everything is perfect. But perfection is an illusion, a mirage that always seems just out of reach. And so, they wait. They wait to take risks. They wait to chase their dreams. They wait to say what needs to be said. And then, one day, they look back and realize they have spent more time waiting than living. The wise understand that the only time to live is now, not tomorrow, not when the circumstances are ideal, not when fear disappears, but now. They do not let uncertainty stop them, for they know that certainty is an illusion. They do not let fear paralyze them, for they know that fear is only a shadow created by the mind. They move forward, not because they are without doubt, but because they understand that doubt is a part of the journey. They take each step with faith, knowing that action creates clarity, that movement shapes destiny, that life rewards those who dare to live fully. Yet, even as people learn to embrace the present, they struggle with another great challenge, the fear of failure. The Buddha teaches there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. And yet, people fear mistakes more than they fear stagnation. They would rather stay in the safety of the known than risk falling. They would rather live in a cage of comfort than step into the uncertainty of growth. But failure is not the enemy, it is the teacher. Every mistake holds a lesson. Every misstep is a part of the path. To fear failure is to fear learning, to fear progress, to fear life itself. A person who understands this does not let failure define them. They do not give up after one setback, nor do they allow obstacles to convince them they are unworthy. They understand that the road to wisdom is paved with mistakes, that growth comes not from avoiding failure, but from rising after each fall. The river does not stop flowing because it encounters a rock, it simply moves around it. The tree does not cease to grow because the wind bends its branches. It strengthens itself against the storm. In the same way, a wise person does not retreat in the face of struggle. They adapt, they learn, they keep going. But even as people begin to accept failure, they face another burden, the burden of the opinions of others. The Buddha once said, "Let go of what people think and be free." Yet so many live their lives trapped by the expectations of others. They seek approval, fearing judgment, shaping themselves to fit the expectations of society, of family, of those around them. But the truth is, no matter what one does, there will always be those who disapprove. There will always be those who criticize, who misunderstand, who impose their own beliefs. And if a person lives to please others, they will never truly be free. A wise person does not shape themselves to fit the mold of others. They do not seek validation, for they understand that true worth does not come from external approval. It comes from within. They do not waste energy trying to be liked by everyone, for they know that such a pursuit is impossible. They walk their path with confidence, knowing that not everyone will understand, and that is okay. They live not to meet expectations, but to be true to themselves. Yet even as people free themselves from the opinions of others, they must also learn the greatest lesson of all, the lesson of impermanence. The Buddha reminds us, nothing is forever except change, and yet people resist this truth. They want love to last forever. Their expectations, they feel betrayed, hurt, lost. But the truth is, suffering does not come from what happens. It comes from expecting something different. A person who expects nothing is free. They love, but they do not demand love in return. They give, but they do not expect gratitude. They work hard, but they do not measure their worth by success. They understand that life owes them nothing, that every moment is a gift, that nothing is promised. And because of this, they do not suffer when things do not go as planned. They do not feel disappointment because they never assumed things would be different. They do not feel resentment because they never believed they were entitled to more. They simply live, accepting each moment as it comes without needing it to be anything other than what it is. And yet, even as people learn to release expectations, they must also learn another great lesson, the lesson of inner stillness. The Buddha reminds us, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. But most people search for peace in the world. They believe that if they just achieve enough, if they just find the right person, if they just reach the right destination, then they will finally be at peace. But peace is not something found in external things. It is not in wealth, in relationships, in success. It is only found within. A person who chases peace outside of themselves will always feel restless. They will believe that just one more achievement, one more possession, one more moment of recognition will bring them fulfillment. But each time they reach their goal, the mind moves the target further away. They climb and climb only to find that happiness is still just out of reach. But a person who understands the nature of peace does not chase it. They cultivate it. They sit in silence. They quiet the mind. They learn to be still. And in that stillness, they discover what was always there, that peace was never outside of them. It was within, waiting to be uncovered. So the path becomes clear, not one of grasping, but of letting go, not one of seeking, but of finding what was already there. The Buddha's teachings do not promise a life without difficulty, but they offer a way to move through life without suffering. They show that freedom is not in controlling the world, but in surrendering to it. That peace is not in chasing more, but in needing less. That happiness is not something to find, it is something to be. A person who walks this path does not fear loss because they do not cling. They do not fear uncertainty because they do not need control. They do not feel disappointment because they expect nothing. They do not seek peace because they carry it within them. They move lightly, freely, unburdened, knowing that life is not meant to be a struggle, it is meant to be lived. And in this way they find what so many have spent lifetimes searching for, not in another place, not in another time, but here, in the simplicity of this very moment. A river does not question where it flows. It does not resist the bends in its path, nor does it grieve the water that moves past it. It simply flows, trusting the course it was meant to take. And yet, human beings resist their own nature. They cling to the past, fearing what comes next. They try to hold on to moments, people, identities, believing that if they grasp tightly enough, they can stop time. But time does not stop. Life does not wait. And the more one clings, the more one suffers. The Buddha once said, "To live is to let go." But people do not want to let go. They want to hold on to love, to success, to youth, to certainty. They believe that if they can just keep everything as it is, they will be happy. But happiness is not found in holding on. It is found in embracing the flow of life. A person who fears change will always struggle because change is inevitable. Seasons shift, relationships evolve, circumstances transform. The wise do not fight this. They move with it. They do not try to freeze time. They cherish each moment as it comes, knowing that its beauty is in its impermanence. Yet, even as people learn to accept change, they struggle with another burden, the illusion of control. The Buddha reminds us, you cannot control the results, only your actions. And yet, most people try to control everything. They try to control how others see them. They try to control their future. They try to force life to go exactly as they planned. But no matter how much they try, life unfolds as it will. And when things do not go their way, they feel anger, frustration, disappointment. But the suffering does not come from what happened. It comes from the belief that things should have been different. A person who understands this does not waste energy trying to control the uncontrollable. They do what they can, but they do not attach themselves to the outcome. They plant seeds, but they do not demand when or how they will grow. They take action, but they do not fight against. And yet, even as people begin to let go of expectations, they must also learn another great lesson, the lesson of presence. The Buddha once said, "The past is already gone, the future is not yet here. There is only one moment for you to live, and that is the present." But people rarely live in the present. They dwell in the past, replaying old memories, holding on to regrets, reliving moments that no longer exist. Or they live in the future, worrying about what is to come, planning, fearing, waiting, and in doing so, they miss the only time that is real, the now. A person who lives in the past is trapped by regret. A person who lives in the future is trapped by anxiety. But a person who lives in the present is free. They do not carry the weight of yesterday. They do not worry about tomorrow. They simply breathe, simply exist, simply experience this moment as it is. They do not wait for happiness in the future. They do not believe that peace is somewhere far away. They understand that everything they seek is already here, within them, within this very moment. But to live in the present is not as easy as it sounds. The mind is restless, always searching, always reaching, always moving from one thought to the next. It clings to worries, to plans, to distractions. But the wise learn to quiet the mind. They do not chase thoughts, they observe them. They do not get lost in emotions. They watch them come and go, like clouds passing through the sky. And in this stillness, they find something extraordinary, a peace that was always there, waiting to be noticed. Yet even as people learn to be present, they face one final challenge, the fear of letting go of who they believe they are. The Buddha teaches, be empty, be formless, let yourself flow like water. But people are afraid to let go of their identities. They hold on to labels, to titles, to the stories they tell themselves about who they are. They believe they must be successful, important, perfect. They attach themselves to the idea of who they think they should be, rather than simply being. But identity is just another illusion, another thing the mind clings to. A person who is truly free does not define themselves by their past, by their achievements, by how others see them. They do not need to be anything other than what they are. They understand that the self is not something rigid, but something fluid, something ever-changing, something as vast and limitless as the sky. And so, the path becomes clear. Not one of holding on, but of releasing. Not one of seeking, but of being. Not one of trying to control life, but of trusting it. The Buddha's teachings do not promise a life without pain, but they offer a way to move through life without suffering. They show that peace is not found in making life perfect. It is found in learning to be at peace with life as it is. A person who walks this path does not resist change because they understand that everything is impermanent. They do not try to control life because they trust in its unfolding. They do not expect things to be different because they accept things as they are. They do not chase the past or fear the future because they live fully in the present. They do not cling to their identity because they know they are not something fixed, but something ever-evolving. And in this way, they find what so many have spent lifetimes searching for, not in another place, not in another time, but here, now, in the quiet simplicity of this very breath. A leaf does not resist the wind that carries it. It does not hold on to the branch, fearing the unknown. It simply surrenders to the flow of nature, drifting where it must, without struggle, without hesitation. And yet, human beings resist this truth. They hold on to things long past their time, fearing change, fearing loss, fearing that if they let go, they will be left with nothing. But the Buddha once said, "You can only lose what you cling to," and in these words lies the key to freedom. True peace is found not in possession, but in release. People believe that security comes from holding on to things, relationships, wealth, status, success. They believe that if they can keep everything in place, they will finally be at peace. But life does not work that way. Everything is temporary. The things we own, the people we love, the identities we build, all of it is in motion, constantly shifting, constantly evolving. And the more we resist this truth, the more we suffer. A person who clings to youth will grieve every wrinkle. A person who clings to love will fear every moment of distance. A person who clings to success will be tormented by the possibility of failure. But a person who understands impermanence does not fear loss. They do not hold on to what must be released. They accept each moment as it comes, knowing that nothing is truly theirs to keep. Yet, even as people begin to release attachment, they struggle with another burden, the burden of the ego. The Buddha teaches,